as well. So next, I want to go to Zach, who is calling in from the UK. Zach, what's going on?
Hi, guys. Can you hear me clearly?
Hi.
Can hear you just fine. What's going on tonight?
Yeah. I was just curious about the word truth. Is that referring to only things we can experiment and test, or does that include beliefs too?
That's a great question. A truth is just whatever you think truth is. You know, like when I posit truth wanted, I want to know what you think is true and what that means to you. Like how is that meaningful to you? Because I can give you my definition of what I think is a good truth definition. I'm sure Katy could give hers, but ultimately, we want to hear from the callers. We want to know what's up. So.
Oh, I mean, I think there's two distinctions between truth in terms of what is known and what is believed to be true. So as a theist, I know things to be true, and I also believe things to be true. So I just wanted to know whether you thought the same way, basically.
Well, to know things to be true and to believe things to be true, I don't know if I necessarily make that distinction. Like,
how can you know that you know something? Like,
yeah.
if you look, the classic is if you look at the clock and it says 2:30, and it is 2:30, but the clock is broken and it's just said 2:30 for 10 years. Did you know it was 2:30? Like, do you know that, or do you just?
I think I can believe that I know something, but I don't know if I can know that I know something. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking about truth in the experience sense, then I think belief becomes unnecessary, doesn't it? Or am I?
Truth in the experience sense. What do you mean?
So, like, for example, eating an orange. I'm experiencing it. I'm tasting it. I'm holding it. I know I'm eating an orange. So if we classify truth as experience, doesn't belief become unnecessary from an atheistic perspective?
Maybe, but experiences can also tell us false information, right?
You could dream about eating an orange and at the time not know that you're dreaming.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone has dreams where they don't know they're dreaming. And if your memories and thoughts and everything are just a chemical process in your brain, then potentially in the future we could just inject them, and you could just tell someone they were eating an orange when they weren't. Also, you could be eating like.
So then, what would? Yeah. Sorry. So then, what would be truth then if we can't really know anything? How would you define truth?
What a great question. Like, literally, philosophers way smarter than me have been asking this for thousands of years, and people have given, really concrete and nominally different, more than nominally, I'm sorry, very, very different ideas of truth and what truth really means. I mean, we could talk about these different theories of truth. We can get into like the nitty gritty of things. But at the end of the day, for myself, I realize I'm a human being on this earth who has to navigate day-to-day life, and I can't like philosophically analyze every single input that comes into my day with the absolute most Pyrrhonic scrutiny possible. And sometimes I have to, go about my time without maybe saying that I know something is true 100%, but still acting on that belief. And so what I would say is, a true thing is something that can match with your experiences. But also is something that can be validated through some sort of reliable process or some sort of reliable mechanism. Okay. And so like, we always talk about gravity, like I can make predictions with gravity. And so I tentatively call the theories that we understand about gravity to be true, with the caveat of knowing that could be updated and changed. But the important thing in that, I think, is having a method by which that information can be changed.
It gives you a confidence level, doesn't it?
Yeah. So
you can be a lot more confidence about that than something with less.
Exactly. Working with some sort of confidence interval of some kind to figure out what's true and what's not, and knowing what I know about how the world works, or at least how I understand the world to work, right? We can actually make predictions with the physical processes we know. We can know that the sun is going to come up at a certain time tomorrow. We can know that a comet is going to come by at a certain time because we have these understandings of physics, and we can make predictions based off these kinds of, again, going back to these inputs and outputs. So that's kind of how I see things. I know that's probably a roundabout way of saying it. I'd probably say something maybe slightly different if I was writing stuff down and not on a call-in show, but like, that's kind of my baseline understanding of how I can understand something to be true. What do you think about that, Zach?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think people have different approaches when it comes to truth. Like I said, I mean, as a theist, I think there are rational arguments for why I can believe something to be true. But these conversations always confuse me because from an atheist perspective, it's about not believing in a God. But if truth is what we experience, then belief or non-belief becomes irrelevant or obsolete, if you see what I'm saying, because all we're looking for is testable, physical, empirical evidence in that sense. So, yeah.
Sure, but well, our beliefs about that empirical evidence is still a belief. You see what I mean? Like, we can still evaluate something empirically and still recognize. See, this is kind of the difference between the kind of empiricist movements of like the early 20th century and whatnot, and why we kind of don't think about things in those kinds of absolute terms, because we recognize that, yes, even though we're using machines and fine tools to kind of give us this information, that information is still being given to us through our eyes or being given to us through our ears, and we're still kind of sensing it as human beings. So that's why I do frame this kind of idea of knowledge still under the umbrella of belief, because it is belief. You can still have belief that you have the knowledge. It all comes back to belief, I think.
There are people who are like 100% are certain that they have experienced something. Like, for example, like the last caller was saying, there are people who are 100% certain that they have experienced an alien abduction, and they know that. They know it's true. But do they? Like, I mean, we can't say for certain that they're wrong, but there's no evidence at all for it. It seems really unlikely.
At least evidence that we would find acceptable enough for us to change our belief, right?
And I do think, like, both talking about aliens and God, if something happened to me where I was convinced I had talked to God or been abducted by aliens or anything, like, that would convince me. I mean, I'm sure I could be convinced of both of those things if it just happened in front of me. If I just saw it, I mean, I'd probably, even if it was irrational, I'd just take it. But then I couldn't. There's no one who I could convince of that. And then what's the difference between me, who I know is sane, and someone who is like totally not sane? It's tricky.
Zach, what do you think?
Would you consider? Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, would you consider rationality to be truth? Or?
I think rationality refers to using systems of logic. I don't necessarily equate that to truth, though. I don't think they're quite the same thing.
I think if you start with some premises like A can't equal not A, then you can say A doesn't equal not A, and that's true. But you still there's some underlying premises to logic. But once you start off with very few premises to logic, there are lots of things you can say are objectively true given the premises. And in that case, like you can say someone is being rational or not. You can say objectively this is irrational because you have said A equals not A, and we both have these premises.
Yeah, I think what I mean by true in that sense is it makes sense, right? It makes sense logically. And would that be sufficient for you to accept something to be true, as in a belief? If something made sense, would you then accept it?
There's loads of things. You can construct whole kind of belief systems which all add up, but they're just false.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, something can definitely make sense to one person, but not make sense to another person.
Or even it could make sense to everyone. Like, I could create a fictional world that is perfectly logical and rational, but I've just made it up. I mean, that's possible.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, but if something made sense, would that be enough to accept it as true, as a belief?
No, because there are things that you can come up with something that's totally convincing. That's absolute bullshit. You totally can't. Like you could hey, the sun revolves around the earth, And you can tell because you can see the sun doing it all the time. You see it moving in the sky and it goes down and then it comes back on the other side. So therefore, the sun moves around the earth. I mean, intuitively, that makes sense. As if you're a kid and you don't know anything. Yeah, like it made sense for most people for a long time until we figured out, hey, that's not the case. So yeah, it has to be more than just making sense for sure.
I think making sense is a prerequisite for believing something. If it doesn't make sense, you can't believe it. But if it does make sense, then you can believe it. That doesn't mean you should.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know if personal incredulity actually matters to truth either, though. But I think Zach wanted to say something.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, I mean with the sun and that, I think that's already been tested, right? But when I think when it comes to God, when I observe when I observe Earth and nature and I see it function in a systematic way, do you think it's rational to believe that systems come about through intentionality?
Nope, I have no reason to believe that. I think this kind of argument from nature is something that a lot of people have opined about for a long time, and I can see where that comes from. It's like, look, there's an ecosystem, and this bird eats the worm, but the worm helps decompose this body, and like all these things are kind of make sense, and it looks designed, on an intuitive level. It's like, wow, there's a method to this madness, but that intuition, I think. It kind of is deceitful to us when you kind of have an understanding of exactly how these systems came to be. When you can look at this and say, look, we can actually show natural processes by which a lot of these systems came. There's not necessarily a reason to impose a supernatural kind of a conduit to it all.
I kind of disagree with this to an extent in that I just think it doesn't look designed. I just think it's either come about through random chance, or it's like unintelligent design, because it's just a mess. Like the whole world is an absolute mess, and there are so many things, like particularly in like how animals work and just how nature works, where like this happens and it just makes no sense at all, but it just kind of works.
Yeah,
that's if I was designing, I could design humans better than God did. Like hands down, that is a challenge I'm laying down. God.
You make a great point, Katy. You make a great point. It's like, there's actually things that really don't make a lot of sense when we kind of look at the design. Like for my eyes, for example, I had to get I had a pretty bad cross eye when I was little. I actually had to get surgery when I was like 5 or 6. That was nothing of that I did to do that. I was just kind of born that way. Like where there's the design.
Bad design, mate.
Bad design there. I got kind of messed up, but
I know. Well, I've got asthma, and that's a bad design. Like I could build lungs better than what I've got.
Yeah.
I couldn't build them. I could design them.
Sure. We can 3D print that stuff now, So.
Well, I wouldn't even design lungs, because why the hell do people need oxygen? Like if I was going to design life, I wouldn't waste time breathing. Not what waste of time.
Yeah, anyway, that's true. Sorry. That's true too. Yeah, what do you think, Zach?
Yeah, I mean, I from my position, I accept the fact that I believe that God didn't create the world and us perfect. So I don't really expect perfection in that sense. But from going back to the systematic sort of line of argument is that we experience or we see systems being formed through intentionality. And I don't think I've ever come across a system with a function that came about without.
What do you mean by we've seen systems form with intentionality? What do you mean by that?
Like cars, for example, right? Cars are formed. A car is a system, right? So that was made by someone who intended to make a car. An airplane, other animals form other systems, whether it's nests or whatever, right?
Sure.
So these come about through intentionality. Now, when we look at Earth and nature and how it functions, we can acknowledge that it's a system, right?
Sure, but let me ask you this, Zach. What would a system without intentionality look like?
I don't know. I haven't witnessed one. That's the whole point.
How do you know you haven't? How do you not have a witnessed one? Yeah.
What's the difference?
because every system I've come across came about through someone intending it to be a system. Someone intended to be a system with a certain function.
Well, we just talked about the Earth, right? Have you seen someone design that?
What, like,
no,
why?
But that's why I come.
So again.
No, but that's why I come to a rational conclusion that it was intended.
So what's happening is, it sounds like you've seen systems that are designed, like cars are designed from people, right? Nests are designed from birds, right? And you're extrapolating that inference by saying, well, these things are designed, therefore these other things must be designed. And that's where Katy and I might disagree.
I'm not using the word designed. I'm using the word system. Like it's things working together to serve a purpose, right? So looking at,
I don't see how that makes a difference, because
right?
you're saying it's designed, right? Like, that's your point.
Oh, I know. I'm saying it's intended, right? So I'm saying systems come about through intentionality, because systems
so it's through
have
intentionality,
purposes, right?
There are a lot of things though that, in order, like, when you look at something like a car and it drives from A to B, like, it does what it's like supposed to, and you can say, oh, that makes sense because people want to get from A to B and they've designed a thing to do it and stuff. But there are all kinds of weird things that, like, animals are very easy to look at. Like, an example, I've just been trying to think of something. With cats, when you stroke their back near their tail, they often arch their back up. Like, just push themselves up. And when they're kittens, that makes sense because their mum wants to get them to stand up and stretch their legs so they can lick them all better and stuff. But the adult cats still do it. Like, that's a system in a very, like, vague sense.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a reaction. It's like, in the vaguest sense, everything is a system. This is a system. Like, why? What? Why would you say that is designed? It's just something that happens.
Or has
like,
intentionality.
There are loads of, it's an irrational reaction. And there, like, humans do all kinds of irrational things. Like, why are you scared of spiders if you live in the UK? There's not a single spider in the UK that can hurt you, unless you read the Daily Mail. And why would you be scared of them? But it's like a system, isn't it? It's a thing that people have. And so somewhat you're saying someone designed that. Someone designed humans to have a natural phobia of spiders. I don't know. It's irrational. Why? Sorry, I'm not being confrontational.
I think fear is... I think fear is just part of our nature. I mean,
there's rational fear and there's irrational fear. Like, it's rational for me to be scared of a tiger. It is not it's not rational for me to be scared of a slow worm. But people are scared of slow worms. Some people. And that's like a system. It's built in. It's part of humans, isn't it? And either we're saying humans naturally have some kind of predisposition to being afraid of slow worms because they look a bit like snakes, and some snakes are poisonous and like are venomous. Some snakes are poisonous too, and that gives them some kind of evolutionary advantage. Always saying someone designed humans to be afraid of something that can't hurt them. Like, why does that look designed to you? Why does it?
Well, it looks it has a function to it, right? It serves a purpose, right?
There's no purpose for anyone on Earth being scared of a slow worm. They're not even snakes; they're lizards. Like, if we should be able to just look at them and be like, "Oh, it's a lizard," and it's not an issue. It's not an adder. In the UK, there's only one snake that can hurt you, or two maybe. But like, why is there fear? People have a fear of, like, house spiders, and it's just a fact they can't hurt you. Someone designed that.
I don't know. Maybe we'd have to look into each individual's case to see why they actually. Maybe they were frightened from a young age. I don't know. Maybe they were
possibly. But if you're frightened from a young age, that's also a system. Like, if you're frightened from a young age and then you carry that through to adulthood, that's a system.
I want to get to some other comments here, but I want to give Zack a chance to kind of respond and kind of give his piece.
Yeah, I mean, just to close out, basically, yeah, I mean, I was just trying to call in and give my thoughts on how I view systems and how systems have functions and how those functions benefit, you know, what those functions were, who those systems were intended for.
So,
and looking at nature and how we benefit. Yeah.
I'll say this, Zack. You know, I can definitely look at systems that benefit people, that have, you know, have that intentionality to it, right? There's a purpose to those systems, but I also see lots of systems that seem purposeless. And I understand that just because I can't figure out the purpose of it doesn't mean that it doesn't have one. But in the same way that if I look at an entire system and say, well, I can infer because, you know, there's some of this that looks designed, maybe the rest of this is designed. I can't infer purpose to all systems just because some of it looks like it does have a purpose. Like, I understand there are some things that have a purpose, but I believe it's there because, like, evolution, you know, put that there, not necessarily that there was a, you know, there's a difference between how I think that thing came here, probably from what you might imagine, but I don't know. We could go a bit more into it, and I'd love to explore this with you more. Sorry, we can't go into it more. We got some other callers we got to get to, but Zack, this is a good call to get into, and I feel like we're just scratching the surface of some of your beliefs. So I'd love to talk to you about it more, because this has been a great conversation so far.
No problem. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have a great night and good night, because you were calling in from the UK, and I'm sure it's just as late over there as it is for Katy.
Yeah, it's quite late.
That was a call I really wish we could really dig into and go more, because I feel like we were really onto something there. This is very good. Zack was very responsive to some of our questions and stuff. I wish we could kind of prod at that a little more, but we got some other callers. I don't want to talk to everybody before we go here. I don't want